Accessing audio archives. Audio file 001.
Reports are now coming in that a large crater has formed in the middle of the Arizona desert. It is unclear at this time whether it is due to seismic activity or an impact from an object outside the atmosphere.
We here at Creepypasta Radio are so happy to have you join us tonight. We're ready to dish out the scares once again. Our first story of the evening can be considered an homage to an old friend. Creepypasta Radio presents The Guide.
I never knew you existed before, but now you're all I can think about. From the moment I saw you, something within me said, "That's it, that's the one." I was nervous, because I have never been a guide before, but I know I am ready for this moment. The last thing I remember before dying was reading a small card, then looking up and seeing terrible red eyes peering into mine. Since this is my first time, I decided to do what my guide did for me. You finally step outside your car and walk inside, stumbling a little on the icy sidewalk and peering tentatively at the icicles above. If I was able, I would laugh at the memory of my mother, or perhaps it was my grandmother, so long ago warning me of the deadly danger that icicles pose. But now I know better. That isn't how death works at all. You slam the door behind you, but I glide through confidently, for I know I am still invisible to your eyes. You turn toward the bathroom, and I blush, and choose not to follow. Instead, I explore your house and ponder on what sort of person you must be. I wonder if you will take this gracefully or filled with terror. I wonder if you are ready. I self-consciously put on my long black robe and glance again at the card I hurriedly wrote, making sure my writing is legible. As you exit the bathroom and head to the kitchen, I take my opportunity and lay the card gently on your table, where I know you must sooner or later notice it. Take your time though, we are in no rush. You hum Bohemian Rhapsody to yourself as you pull a frozen dinner from the freezer and pop it in the microwave. I consider starting a fire to make my first guiding experience more grand, but I think you would prefer it my way. I could almost feel an echo of my long-stilled heart as you turn around and fixate on my note. Peering around anxiously, you bend along to pick it up and read it. I get into place because I know as soon as you read my name, you will be able to see me, and I must make myself terrifyingly presentable. This is so exciting. My name is Death. I am not the only death, but one of many. See, most people think of death as falling asleep and waking up on another side. But that's not right at all. Death is like being pulled by your ankle deep into the depths of the ocean, sudden, inexplicable, and suffocating. I am here to drag you there, for none can achieve death on their own.
What a frightening tale. And I should warn you, if you fear death, then you should fear us. Our next story of the evening shows how a small thing like a leak can turn into something so much bigger. In the story, it started as a leak. The rainy season began in early summer, and June had been no exception. It did not surprise the man when he discovered rainwater dripping from his living room ceiling. Shrugging it off, he placed a tall pot beneath the leak and expected it to stop on its own. However, it continued to rain, and before he knew it, the pot would threaten to overflow. He had to dump the water out first thing in the morning and straight after he returned home from work. Eventually, he began to notice water damage at the source of the leak. The white ceiling had discolored, turning a dull shade of brown. He checked the weather and realized that it would continue to rain sporadically over the next 2 days. The man worried about the ceiling mildewing and becoming an expensive repair, so he called a local handyman. Unfortunately, the man could not sign to have the repairs done. Only his landlord could. It was a frustrating policy. The man called his landlord but could not reach him. He left him a few voicemails detailing how the damage was becoming progressively worse. The man was clueless as to why his landlord would not return his calls. They usually kept in touch, speaking at least twice a month. Finally, he reasoned that he would not be held accountable for any damages sustained. One night, the man was startled awake by a massive thump. He quickly turned on his bedside lamp and just vaguely he could see an overturned table and a large shape laying across it. He sprinted out of his apartment and called the police, gagging at the smell. The man sat in the police station with a blanket wrapped around his shoulders and a coffee mug resting in his hands. He did know one thing. There had been a dead body in his ceiling, and the water had saturated it so badly that it caved under the weight. So far, the body was unidentifiable due to rainwater and was being autopsied. While the man waited, he called his landlord and finally reached him, panicking as he explained the situation. His landlord was just as alarmed, and the man pleaded for him to come to the station while he made his statement. The man paused as a detective crossed over to him, and he lowered his phone, wondering if the body had been identified. His blood ran immediately cold, and he shook his head with terror. The body belonged to Richard Thompson, his landlord, and he had died over a year ago. That's not what disturbed him the most. If his landlord was dead, then who was pretending to be him? And that's why I always choose face-to-face interactions. Our next story of the evening is based on...
I'm putting this out there in hopes that someone will hear it. Anyone. Whatever you do, don't listen to Creepypasta Radio. It's how they turn you. Something about the radio waves, or embedded subliminal messaging, or something. That is how they get in your head. A few months after the incident, Creepypasta Radio started to air. At first, we thought it was another...
Sorry about that, folks. I thought that we were past having these little interruptions, but it looks like we're not. We're getting that looked at as we speak. Please ignore any incoming transmissions during our broadcast. As we were saying, the next story this evening is based off of the childhood fear that something may be lurking in your room, in your closet, or under your bed. We present to you the story, Every Child's Fear.
You remember the feeling, don't you? The feeling that you're being watched, that if you make the slightest movement, you are dead. Everybody had that fear as a child. You wake up in the night, can't get back to sleep, shuffling back and forth from one uncomfortable position to the next, hoping to find a way to sudden slumber. You give up. There is no way you're going back to sleep anytime soon. So you simply turn to your side and stare out the window. The road, the lights, the trees, all seem so strange under the cover of night. You try to keep your mind quiet of any distractions, remembering that you still need to sleep. And that's when the feeling hits you. The feeling swarms over you like a nice cold blanket that has just been spread across your back. You remember that it's night, and that night is when fear likes to hunt. You feel almost as if you are being watched from behind you. You can't see it, but its eyes are trained on you. You want to move, but you can't. If you do, something bad, no, something horribly wrong is going to happen to you. The only thing you can do is remain quiet and still, and then it won't notice you. As you lie on your bed, frozen in fear, you begin to think about your bed seats. If only you could quickly grab your bed seats and throw them over yourself, to hide your body from whatever evil monstrosity stands behind you. It could be done. Perhaps, if you're fast and precise, you could succeed. You decide to think no longer. You flip yourself up and grab your bed seats with both hands. Without looking around the room, you swipe back down, covering yourself with a thick blanket. Safety. It is then that your mind comes back to you, and you remind yourself that there is nothing there. Darkness clouds the mind and causes it to hallucinate. With the only limitations being your imagination, you slowly poke your head out of the seats and scan your eyes around the room. Nothing. You place your head back on the pillow and slowly drift off to sleep. This is every child's fear, and parents always tell their children to go back to sleep, and that is good for them, to work through their fears. They are wrong, because what they don't know is that when their children hide under their bed seats, the real fear is not what is standing over them, but what is staring at them from under the covers.
We thank you so much for joining us for this evening's edition of Creepypasta Radio, and we sincerely hope you have a restless night. Take care, and as always,
Never stop listening.